Hello, my friend. Let's dive straight into the situation at the border, as there has been a lot of movement along the front line. The Ukrainian Armed Forces are gradually advancing toward the settlement of Hlushkovo. Yesterday, there was notable progress in the area around the village of Veseloe, with several kilometers gained. Today, heavy fighting is ongoing for the village, but reports late last night suggested that the Ukrainian forces had nearly cleared it. After securing this village, Ukrainian forces will be able to move directly toward Hlushkovo. However, the Russians are trying to halt the advance, and there has been a significant increase in shelling of border villages. Meanwhile, the Russian side has continued their counteroffensive, and unfortunately, they've had some success. They've regained control over a significant area and broke through another 15 kilometers near the village of Lyubimivka. Heavy fighting is ongoing there. The Ukrainian forces are doing their best to hold the defense, but with 35,000 Russian troops attacking from all sides, maintaining the defense is tough, forcing the Ukrainian forces to slowly retreat. Russian forces have captured the village of Snagast and advanced towards Lyubimivka in the Kursk region. There is also Russian progress towards Lyubimivka, which poses a threat to Ukrainian forces on the northern flank. Russian sources are reporting battles for Lyubimivka and Ukrainian forces advancements across the border in the Hlushkovo district of Kursk. In the Kharkiv direction, the Russians are continuing their attacks near the village of Hlyboke and Lyptsi. However, they've made no gains, as the Ukrainian forces successfully repel all attacks. Fighting for Vovchansk continues, with multiple reports of clashes near the village of Hlyboke. There is hope that the Ukrainian forces are managing to push the Russians back in this area, but we are still waiting for official confirmations. Now let's move on to the front line, starting with the Pokrovsk direction. Here the Russians are continuing the offensive actions along a wide front, but it's worth noting that the activity has halved. Over the past day, the Russians carried out 28 assaults compared to 60 previously. Despite their efforts, they are no longer able to advance toward Pokrovsk and Mirnograd, as the Ukrainian forces have successfully halted their progress. The only notable Russian success is near Kurakhivka, where their forces are pushing forward. There is currently the most challenging situation, as the Russians are making gains towards Kupiansk. Additionally, the Ukrainian forces report that they have been forced to retreat from Zhelanne Pershe. Russian sources have officially claimed full control of the village, and now the only remaining obstacle are Zhelanne Druge and the village of Vodiane. Heavy fighting continues there, with the Russians pouring in maximum reserves. They are pressing not only from Zhelanne Pershe, but also from Krasnohorivka, complicating the defense of this part of the front. Meanwhile, the Russians continuing to assault Selidove, attempting breakthroughs near Novogrodivka, Grodivka, Mirolubivka, Vozdvizhenka and Novoalexandrivka, as they try to expand their control territory across the fields toward Tarasivka. However, the Ukrainian forces are successfully holding the line, and the front line remains unchanged. Although the distance from the current front line to the outskirts of Mirnograd is only 3 kilometers, Russian drones have been freely reaching the outskirts of Mirnograd and Pokrovsk, but in response, the Ukrainian forces have been effectively using FPV drones against the advancing Russian forces. In the direction of Kurakhove, the Russians are attempting to break through toward Alexandropol, aiming to push the Ukrainian forces back across the water barrier. Fighting is also ongoing near Maximilianivka, the village of Kostiantynivka and Katerynivka. In this area, the Russians are conducting over 40 assaults with maximum activity, but fortunately, no new successes have been recorded overnight for the Russian forces. In the Vuhledar direction, unfortunately, the Russians have managed to capture Vodiane and even advance beyond the village. The situation near Vuhledar worsens with each Russian advancement. Meanwhile, the battle near the city continues with the Russians assaulting Zolota Neva. The Ukrainian forces are successfully repelling all attacks, though periodic losses of territory are still occurring, as evident from the ongoing developments. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, the Russians have temporarily reduced their activity, conducting shelling, but their front line remains unchanged. In the Kherson direction, Russian forces are once again attempting to break through to the islands to gain full control, possibly for a future advance on the right bank. However, the Ukrainian forces are doing everything possible to thwart the Russian operation. Meanwhile, the shelling of the right bank continues, and Russian propagandists are dreaming of a return to Kherson.
Херсон надо возвращаться.
Херсон это история. Никто не говорит, что Херсон это какой-то город, который создан там Украиной. Он создан Потемкиным, Суворовым.
Конечно, мне еще надо туда заехать, я обязательно там буду.
However, Russian war correspondents are sharing quite a different story from the Kherson direction. Here is what they are reporting. Unclear rumors are circulating from the general staff that somewhere someone is making decisions to return the Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions to the Ukrainians. In short, I spoke on the phone tonight with a classmate who now serves in the General Operation Directorate of the General Staff. I complained about the lack of personnel in our Dnipro group and the stagnation in combat activity on our fronts. The response I received was something like, "Why waste your people? These regions will be returned to the Ukrainians after the negotiations." I'm not sure how true my classmates' words are, but as the deputy head of one of the departments, he should be in the loop. These are grim news, but they explain a lot, like why we've stopped preparing for advances on our fronts. How reliable this information is remains questionable. But it could be a sign that there are indeed plans for negotiations. This may explain the heightened activity in the Donetsk region, as it seems Russia wants to fully seize the Donetsk region and is doing everything possible to make that happen. Now, let's move on to the Donetsk direction, where Russian forces have also reduced the activity. Over the past day, around 6 assaults have been recorded here. The Russians are still trying to break through toward Donetsk near the village of Dachne and are also assaulting Lyubimivka. However, shelling continues, but the advances on the front line have stalled with no significant changes for the past day. In the Chasiv Yar direction, the situation remains difficult, although activity has decreased slightly, with 4 assaults recorded in the past day around Chasiv Yar and Andriivka. Ukrainian forces are successfully repelling all attack, and the front line remains unchanged. In the Siversk direction, however, Russian forces have increased their activity, attempting to advance from multiple directions towards Siversk. They are assaulting Bilogorivka, Verkhnyokamyansk, Spirne, Vyimka, and Serebryanka. Despite these efforts, there have been no significant changes on the front line over the past day, as Ukrainian forces have managed to fend off all attacks. In the Crimea direction, Russian forces are conducting attacks on Nevsky, Yampolivka and Torske, while also attempting to break through to the Serebryanka forestry from Dibrova. However, Ukrainian forces are holding the defense firmly and the front line hasn't changed. In the Svatove area, emboldened by previous success, the Russians are trying to advance toward Lozova, but they are failing to make any progress. Ukrainian forces are repelling all attacks, and so far every assault has been unsuccessful. Further south, heavy activity continues with assaults on Kopanki, Novoyegorivka, Kharkiv and Makiyivka. Despite early Russian advances, Ukrainian forces maintain their defense and the front line remains unchanged. In the Kupiansk direction, fighting continues near Synkivka, Petropavlivka, and further south, Russian forces are trying to break through to Hlushkovo, and battles are ongoing in the fields near Novosynove. However, Ukrainian forces have successfully repelled all attacks and the front line has remained unchanged for the past day. Meanwhile, due to the potential delivery of long-range weapons to Ukraine and the possibility of strikes on Russian territory, the Russians are preparing for the worst. They have already started relocating their ships from vulnerable zones. In light of news about possible permission for Ukraine to strike Russian territory with Western weapons, the Russians have evacuated ships from their main naval base in Novorossiysk. As of today, the ships are heading south towards Sochi. This indicates that such serious matters shouldn't be discussed publicly, and ideally, Ukraine would have already destroyed those ships before the US announced their approval. In reality, Russia is actively removing all assets from potential strike zones. Meanwhile, there are shocking statements indicating that no improvement in the war can be expected, and Russia plans to continue fighting until 2026. Russia plans to end the war by late 2025 or early 2026 with its victory, said Kirill Budanov, head of Ukraine's military intelligence. He noted that Russia aims to conclude the war by this timeline due to anticipated economic and social problems. For them, 2025 is key. If they don't emerge from this war as conditional victors, they will be excluded from being seen as a superpower for at least the next 30 years, Budanov emphasized. Russia expects serious financial and economic issues by summer 2025 and is accelerating internal processes to exit the crisis. The country will face a dilemma to announce mobilization or reduce the intensity of hostilities. Similarly, NATO partners have upheld this sentiment. Stoltenberg explains that the West's long-term strategy is to outlast Putin, reported CNS. We need to keep fighting until Putin realizes he cannot win and that the cost of victory will be too high, said the NATO Secretary General. Friends, feel free to share your thoughts on this in the comments. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.